Hi, I'm Ryan Greer, Cannabis Policy Lead at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and co-chair of the National Cannabis Working Group. I'm here with Ivan Ross Vrana, who's the VP Government Relations and Business Development for Even Co. How are you doing today, Ivan Ross?
Not too bad, Ryan. Thanks for having me. And how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks. Maybe first, could you tell me just a little bit about Even Co?
Yeah, certainly in a very short and succinct sentence, we have about 1 million square feet of grow space. We're a license holder located in Strathroy, Ontario, which is about 30 minutes west of London, Ontario. It's a company that's been in the space since about 2015, and it's a female-focused company for the cannabis products. We have some cannabis products rolling out. But right now, we're just selling flower. And then, of course, the other proud thing that we're happy to announce on March 4th, we have our EU GMP certification. So we plan to be exporting to Europe.
That's terrific. I'm wondering, as a licensed cannabis producer, if you could just provide us a bit of an overview of how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting Even Co. and the cannabis industry generally, and sort of some of the liquidity issues that companies are facing.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as you know, sales across the country are difficult because, especially in Ontario, it's only click and collect. So people are missing that store experience. So that's a little bit difficult right now. Our staff, people have been working fantastic. We're grateful that we're declared an essential service. Though, we are seeing a bit of a reduction in people on our production size writ large, just given that we're taking every single precaution possible to ensure the safety of our staff. So that's a bit of an issue. And then, of course, we're very pleased to see that the government's announced several programs to help with companies that are small, medium-sized enterprises like ours, and that the BDC and the EDC have provided funding. But like everything else, the issue writ large is you have to deal with an established bank. And as the cannabis industry overall, that's not necessarily always been the case. So that makes it challenging a little bit to get access to those emergency funds. And there's a lot of details to be worked out still, which we're waiting on to hear from the BDC.
Thanks. Yeah, that's something we've been hearing at the chamber from several cannabis companies. Obviously, that the relationship with the traditional lenders isn't as strong as other sectors, and a lot of these liquidity programs maybe aren't as accessible. One of the things the industry has been talking about, and I know upwards of 60 plus companies signed a letter to various federal ministers, including the Minister of Health, asking for some relief from the 2.3% annual regulatory fee that license holders pay. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what that 2.3% fee is.
Well, essentially, that's a cost recovery regime, and that's 2.3% that I pay back to the government on my gross revenue. So it's a fair regulatory issue to have. The government of Canada is very familiar with this. It happens across a lot of industries. And the idea is that, given that the government is regulating this industry has to pay back in order to support those services. That's not the issue whatsoever. I think we would support that. This has been rolled out for about 1.5 years now. But the issue right now, given what we're going through with COVID, obviously service standards have dropped off. And the other thing that I think is a little bit of a bone of contention with me is that there are no service standards. They haven't been introduced when this rolled out. And so as a former public servant, as somebody who worked at Health Canada, I know how important that is. I appreciate how hard the people are certainly working at Health Canada. But this has been an issue that dates back to when the service standard was introduced on the 2.3%. And really the way I kind of look at, the cost recovery, the User Fees Act and so forth, service standards are supposed to be put in place when these are rolled out. That was never done over 1 year ago. And so I sort of view this as a tax, and maybe I'm simplistic in my thinking, but I tend to think, well, a tax can only be implemented by the Parliament of Canada, not by a department. So I would hope, that Health Canada, Finance Canada, Treasury Board come together and look at this and either say, okay, we can put a moratorium on the 2.3%, but writ large, I would like to see them also introduce the service standards so we know we have something to expect, because that does not exist today. And that holds up things as we start to plan and go forward on our licensing, expansion, various export permits. We are shipping to Europe or plan to ship to Europe very shortly, and we want to get this done as quickly as possible.
Thanks. I mean, I think those are great observations. On the first, that relief from this 2.3% is a very simple, straightforward step that Health Canada can take to provide some much needed liquidity to Canada's cannabis industry, especially
Yeah.
as it competes against a very well-established illegal market. And then I think the second point is really important, that we need to look at how we can actually make the fee itself improve by attaching service standards to it. Something that's reasonable for any company to expect that is providing this funding to Health Canada. Before we go, any last thoughts or words on where the sector's heading as we hopefully emerge out of this COVID-19 pandemic and start to reopen our economy?
Well, I think the optimistic thing that, I see in Ontario, which is nice to see, is a lot more stores are coming online, or at least being approved. So once we can get to those bricks and mortars, I think that will be very helpful for companies like mine and also the retail sector. So very happy to see that rolling out across the country. So I think we will get there, but it is a tough time for the industry. We do see a lot of layoffs obviously happening. So liquidity will be an issue. But I think as we start to grow and we're maturing in this industry for a while now, I do see the positives of it overall. And it's an industry that's here to stay. And, based on Stats Canada, last figures I saw, we contributed approximately, I think, $8 billion to GDP. So I think that's a very positive sign that this is a growth industry and it's here for a while.
Great, thanks. Ivan Ross Vrana from Evenco. Thanks much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan, and thanks to the Chamber for doing this.